I have tried different diets over the years. I think you have too. I mean, we've experimented. I did, uh, carb backloading. I don't know if you were around when I was doing
Oh,
that,
I
where
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, I experimented with having no carbs early in the day, and then it was like you were supposed to have like donuts
Yeah.
and all these terrible carbs, quote unquote terrible carbs later in the day. We've done intermittent fasting. I think what I've kind of settled in on is just trying to follow some guidelines, basically that the overall guidelines point me in the right direction, and then the specifics, as long as I'm following those guidelines, don't matter too much, and I don't have to stress about the exact amount of any one thing that I'm getting. So those guidelines would be, first of all, I go for whole foods. I as much as I can, I try to incorporate whole foods, and that's usually fruits, veggies, meats, usually lean meats, unprocessed meats, or not highly processed meats at least, um, and whole grains, I would say. And the only macro I'm really concerned about, only macronutrient I'm really concerned about is protein. And I try to get roughly 1 gram per pound of body weight uh, each day. So for me, that's about 240 to 250 grams of protein. If I'm a little over, that's okay. If I'm a little under, of course, it's okay too. But I try to not be too far under that. And if I'm getting my whole foods and I'm getting my fruits and veggies and whole grains, that usually we actually had a conversation, a little bit of a debate the other night about, do you even care about how much fiber you're getting, or do you pay attention to how much fiber you're getting? And I do, but only in the sense that I make sure if I'm getting a vegetable with almost every meal and a fruit with most meals, I'm not too worried about counting exactly how much fiber I'm getting. The fiber and the micronutrients will kind of take care of themselves. So, do you do anything too drastically different, or is that similar to what you do? And if so, how?
Very similar. I think you and I have built our meals around protein for many years now. And like you kind of alluded to, a lot of other aspects of dieting or a diet plan have kind of come in and out that, experiment with some intermittent fasting here, a little of this, a little of that, but it comes back to protein. And the thing that I have found for me and other people is when you focus on that protein, and whether it's a gram per pound of body weight or even a little less than that for some people, especially depending on, where your weight is at. Like for you and me, we're sort of around the weight we want to be. If somebody's a lot or a little or a lot overweight of where they would like to be, I would not have them eat 1 gram of protein per pound of that body weight. I would say eat 1 gram of protein per pound of what's closer to your ideal body weight. So he's 250 pounds and they'd like to be 200 pounds. They would eat 200 grams of protein. Um, Whatever that is, whether it's your ideal weight or your actual weight, when you eat that protein, I have found it's really hard to overeat a lot of other stuff. Protein is, especially assuming, and most of the time to get that much protein, this is the case, you're eating good lean meats, fish, eggs, whey protein shakes, that stuff. Those things are very filling, very satiating. If you have 150, 200, 250 grams of that protein a day, it's very hard to cram in a lot of extra other calories. Then on top of that, if you do what you just said, and you don't worry about counting carbs and fats, but you just focus on I'm eating fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains. Now it's really hard to have too many calories in there, which is principally why people aren't the weight they are. Is you're consuming too many calories, you're not burning enough. You and I don't have that problem and never have had that problem of being overweight. But so, it might seem easy for us to say, well, like we don't count calories or we're not counting carbs or fats. But I do think that if you focus on that protein for anyone and then eating whole foods, as you said, it's really hard to not be in a pretty good spot. And you might not have weight flying off you right away, but it's definitely sustainable for the long term. It's super. When you first started saying that, my first thought was like, yeah, what's great about these principles too is they're super flexible. I can, I think you do and I do. It's like I'm not counting my carbs, but you like start to be aware of them and you can flex them in and out. You might have a big carb day, you might have a lower carb, might have a big fat day, lower fat day. It doesn't really matter as long as you're hitting that protein and eating mostly, it's not exclusively, mostly whole foods, fruits and veggies, grains, lean meats. It's really hard to overeat that stuff. And to the fiber and eating those fruits and vegetables, they all have fiber. And that's good for a number of things, feeding gut bacteria, helping you, move your bowels. But it also just makes you feel full, which is a huge problem for especially people struggling with their weight. If you're eating those more processed, hyper palatable foods, they are giving you excess calories and they're not satiating you. So I think following principles is more sustainable. It's easier to do. A lot of people don't have the time or desire, and quite frankly, I don't either, to sit and count carbs or weigh out all my food. It's just too much. And so I think we've kind of settled, we're very similar, settled on these diet principles, and that just kind of guides our nutrition all the way through.
Yeah. So you said a lot of good stuff there. One thing that I would just throw in right now, or right off the bat, is everyone's obviously individual, and everyone's going to be different. And a key word you said there was sustainability. So what is sustainable for everyone is going to be different. Now, you laid out a lot of good reasons. I mentioned a few why we think these principles of basically, whole foods and high protein are sustainable for most people. But some people might want to just, if they can just restrict the time that they eat to a specific window, that's what's going to make them eat less. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this too: if you do overeat whole foods, you are still going to gain weight. So like if you have, a real healthy snack, quote unquote healthy snack of cashews or almonds, and you eat a whole bag of them, that's a lot of calories in there. And at the end of the day, your weight is determined by how many calories you eat versus how many calories you burn. And it to some extent doesn't matter where those calories come from, as far as weight goes. So I just wanted to kind of throw that caveat in there almost of obviously it's individual, and we think that there's a lot of good reasons to kind of employ the guidelines that we're laying out here, but that doesn't mean that they're absolute either. And then obviously I think in today's society there's a lot of focus on losing weight, but there's also people who want to gain weight, and so that's a different ball game altogether. One thing you mentioned is protein of your ideal body weight, and that's something that you can employ in that situation as well. And then again, the other thing I wanted to point out is if you're an athlete, then body composition might not even be at the top of your list of priorities, and you might need quick, depending on what kind of athlete you are. If you're an athlete that requires quick bursts of energy and explosive movements, then the best fuel for that is carbohydrates. So you might want to focus on carbohydrates more there. And that is something that I've done too. When I have a high intensity, explosive effort, quick burst day, I do try to at some point get more carbs in. But as you said, it really doesn't have to be too specific unless you're completely emptying out your reserves of the carbohydrates that you've ate over the last day or two or three. Then you don't necessarily need to eat carbs on that day. So just wanted to throw a few caveats in there. And it's funny you mentioned also that, we've centered our meals around protein. It's something that I almost take for granted these days. Like I can't even fathom a meal that doesn't have a base of protein, to where if I go out to eat and I see a meal, it's almost like Or even if I'm ordering an appetizer, it's like, well, why am I going to order that appetizer if it doesn't have any protein in it? It's just the way that I've wired my brain to work the meathead in me. Even a cheat meal, it's like, why would I have pizza when I could have a burger? At least the burger has a burger patty that has protein in it. That's just how I've wired my brain over the
Yeah,
years.
yeah. I think it's not even, you know, people might hear it differently. It's not that we are built. I mean, we are building the meal around protein, but not even necessarily like just counting the protein in it, but literally the food choice. If you think what do I want to have for dinner, it
Mm-hmm.
immediately starts with, well, what food? What's the protein food? Which usually, I mean, for us, and I would say for most people, unless you're vegan or vegetarian or something, that should start with some sort of meat, fish, eggs, you know, animal protein, and then build the meal out from there. If you want to have rice with the chicken or potatoes with the chicken or broccoli or whatever you have, build it out from there. But for us, it always starts with what's the meat, how much protein is in that meat, and then everything kind of takes care of itself from there.